Hello, and welcome to the AniMonday podcast. My name is Colin Hemphill.
My name's Kayla Hemphill.
On our show, we roll the virtual dice each week and must watch a randomly selected anime title. Thanks for joining us. We're back for the second time, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, as long as you didn't tune out by the first episode and you're still with us, thank you for being here.
Yeah, that first one was a doozy.
Yeah. So last week at the end of our premiere episode, we hit the random button on Crunchyroll, and the show that appeared was called Magical Girl Ore. So this title literally means Magical Girl Me. We only know the slightest bit about Japanese, so I'm not going to try to talk about this regularly on the show.
Right.
But it is applicable here because the title is sort of a play on words.
Mm-hmm.
Ore is the pronoun for me or I, and it's a male pronoun. And from what I can tell, it's kind of used to emphasize superiority and masculinity, especially. So it's not only referring to a male, it's meant to be really masculine.
Which makes a lot of sense for the show.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not only informal, but it's also seen as sort of a rude usage. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. If that gives you any hints about what the show is about, then here we go. So it was originally a manga series from 2012 to 2014. And there's a 12-episode anime adaptation that just completed its run in June of this year. I don't know if there's going to be more or anything. We watched the first 4 episodes, so we don't really know where it goes from here. But the director is Itsuro Kawasaki, who directed and storyboarded quite a few other things. But among them is that Pokemon Origins series that we watched.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Additionally, the animation studio that did this is Pierrot. They did a lot of stuff, so they're known for Bleach and Naruto and Yu Yu Hakusho. Mm-hmm. They also animated Miss Machiko. So they've been around for quite a while.
Wow, yeah, that is a while.
So here we go. We're going to discuss the first 4 episodes, and as usual on our show, we'll try to avoid major spoilers, but we are going to get into the details.
So when we first started this series, we get introduced to the main character. Her name is Saki, and she is a normal teenage girl who is in a pop idol band with her best friend, trying to make it big in order to impress her crush Mohiro, and not doing so great. They're totally unpopular. Nobody comes and sees their shows. Mm-hmm. So after one of her failure shows, she comes home to her mom and a strange man and discovers that her mom used to be a magical girl up until very recently when she hurt her back. And her mom and this guy are trying to convince her to become a magical girl herself. And she's totally rejecting the idea until she finds out that her crush Mohiro has actually been kidnapped by demons. And Saki takes it upon herself to try to rescue her crush. So she runs out, and this triggers her magical girl transformation, in which she becomes a giant buff dude.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. A buff dude who still wears the magical girl outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ribbons, bows, the skirt, the whole shebang, but a big buff dude. So after defeating the demons very violently, she finds out that her best friend and her band's manager had actually seen the whole thing happen, watched her transform, and they know now that she's a magical girl. And they totally embrace it. They're really excited for her. In fact, her manager is a total fanboy of magical girls. And so she decides to embrace it and just keep doing the magical girl thing. And this culminates when she discovers that her crush, Mohiro, has been kidnapped again. And she goes off to rescue him, but in fact ends up needing rescuing herself. And her best friend also becomes a magical girl. She gets triggered and becomes also another big buff dude in a dress. And after they defeat the demon, they have this flashback onto how they became in love with their different people, because in order to become a magical girl, you have to be in love with somebody. So we have this flashback episode that shows when her best friend fell in love with her and when Saki fell in love with Mohiro, which happens to be the same day. And this leads to the manager deciding that the two magical girls should form a pop idol group in their magical girls form. So as two buff dudes in dresses, that should be the band. And they put it on the internet, and it surprisingly becomes really popular. So popular, in fact, that they get to be on a TV show. And so...
Right away,
yeah, because that's what happens. So they go to the TV station to film their big premiere, and they meet another superhero, but not a magical girl, just a guy who's decided he's going to save the city from demons with his bicycle.
Yep.
And they discover that Mohiro, once again, is in trouble with demons, that demons are trying to kidnap him. And so while people are filming, they beat up the demons and they are on TV as these magical girls who fight demons in front of a live audience. And that's kind of where episode 4 ended.
Yep. So there's an actual plot this week.
Yeah, there are.
That's a nice change of pace.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's funny. They basically outline the whole plot in the first few seconds of the show.
Yes.
And really, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's seen a magical girl show. It's pretty much the same thing overall. Yes. And I guess we shouldn't assume like everyone listening would know. But basically, a magical girl anime is a sort of genre that there is some kind of evil in the world, and the only people who can take care of it are these young girls who are given magical abilities in order to fight the evil thing. Usually by like signing a contract with some entity of some sort. And so this is kind of a humorous take on that sort of genre. And so while on the surface, it's really typical of this genre, it's very different also. Yes.
Yeah. It is also combining kind of two genres at the same time, which is the pop idol genre of like going to be heavy on the music, just talking about show business life, and then conversely, this magical girl genre. So this is kind of combined together. So there's lots of music, but there's also girls in skirts transforming into magical girls.
Yeah. So in terms of the story and the characters that went along with this show, one thing that I was thinking about is that there's kind of one primary gag that defines the show, and that's obviously the fact that when the magical girls transform, normally they would get like a fancy outfit and they would get some sort of magical weapon. And then they would be able to use their powers to fight the evil. In this case, they just turn into big dudes.
Yes.
In fact, that plot is even more specific in the weapons that they get. They don't really get weapons.
Right.
The guy they sign a contract with just tries to like give them a gun and
with unlimited ammo
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there's really there's very little magic to it.
Yes, other than the transformation part.
Right. I guess the conceit is like, oh, you just need to be a big buff dude to beat all these things up.
Which is what they say, actually. There's a line that says, well, men are just better at fighting, so it makes sense.
Yeah. I do think they give the gag away a little bit too easily, if you know what I mean. Like, if you knew Japanese, you would know from the title that there's something to do with men. And if you see the box art or like any screenshot from Crunchyroll or anything like that, even the intro animation, it shows like both of their forms.
Yeah, that was one thing that was kind of disappointing, is knowing that her best friend was going to get this form.
Yeah.
Because you saw it in the intro video.
At the very beginning of the show, we actually see Saki dreaming, and it's in her dream that she wants to become a magical girl, and she doesn't even know that exists in real life, so she kind of sees it as a TV show. In fact, they make some jokes about how it's really just an animation that's playing in her head while she's dreaming. But I love in this plot that when her dream actually comes to fruition, it's kind of squashed at the same time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because none of it is the way that she pictured in her head, and none of it is the way she would want this to happen.
Yeah. Between her physical form, which embarrasses her to no end, she's also really kind of disturbed by how much actual violence there is. You know, if you watch a lot of magical girl anime, you'll know that typically the violence that takes place is kind of brushed to the side because it's, you know, they use magic to get rid of the enemies.
They just kind of vaporize, or there's some magical rainbow explosion and they disappear. Their only option in beating these demons up is to, like, bash them with a rod, basically.
Yes.
And obviously that's used for comedic effect as well.
Yes.
But it's just keeps pounding on this fact that all of her dreams are coming true, but it's not at all what she wanted. And I think my favorite aspect of that was the fact that she's in a failing pop duo, and when she finally gets her chance, it's not even her. It's this male form that she's transformed into.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense because she's been trying so hard. At one point, she even talks about how she just has these piles and piles of CDs in her room.
Yeah.
And she suddenly becomes extremely popular really quickly as a dude.
Yeah. This hits close to home, I would say, which is kind of sad and funny. But it's true. Like, my bandmate and I have talked about, you know, what if we just did one pop song? Like, really bad pop. We write it in the most trite, sort of cliche way with the most basic sorts of production value. And we put it out there and we suddenly get huge. And then we just ride that wave for a little while until we're able to do what we actually want to do.
Sure.
So I thought that was funny.
Sure. So you related.
It's pretty accurate and funny in the way that it presents that kind of thing.
Yeah, so a lot of the characters in the show kind of play on the different genres that are in both of these kind of shows. So both in the pop idol kind of way and then in the magical girl sort of way. So Saki herself is pretty classic for a magical girl. She reminds me a lot of Usagi from Sailor Moon.
Yeah.
She's a little boy crazy. She's kind of klutzy. But she's fiercely, fiercely loyal to her loved ones. I love that they take her and just put these little tweaks on her, right? So a lot of times when you see these magical girls, they have some sort of redeemable part. Like they suddenly either become competent as magical girls or they become more beautiful or something. And the exact opposite happens to her. She becomes a dude. She's not more talented. Like, she's not suddenly a really good fighter or, in fact, she's also a terrible singer. Which
is one of my favorite things.
Yeah, and she doesn't suddenly become a better singer. She's still a bad singer. And so she's kind of this play on, you know, what goes on with especially the magical girl genre, but kind of done in a new way.
Yeah, when we had talked about this a little bit, we had mentioned how Saki and her friend is really just a better version of her in every way.
Yes.
In some ways. So she's a great singer, and Saki is just kind of barely hanging on by a thread in the pop duo. And physical traits as well are clearly, they're shown in a certain way that her friend is supposed to be the superior model.
She's more well-developed.
Yes. And the fact that it sort of carries over into her transformation is pretty funny as well.
Yes. Yeah, even in the transformation, her best friend is taller than she is, a little more buff than she is.
She's instantly really good at fighting the demons. She comes out and starts smashing them to pieces immediately. Yeah, it's really good. As far as other characters, so the male pop duo, not the transform pop duo, but
Mohiro and his bandmate.
His band, I forget his friend's name, but the band's name is Star Prince. And Mohiro himself is kind of a character who doesn't really say anything.
Yeah, he's a bit of a wet blanket.
Yeah. Outside of his singing, of course. When he gets on stage, he immediately opens up and he's able to sing and convey his feelings that way. Additionally, we learn that his singing has the power to summon animals to his aid. That happens in one of the flashbacks.
Yes.
And also, even though he doesn't verbally speak, his gestures are kind of understood by pretty much everyone in the show, and it's kind of translated on screen, but somehow people are able to figure out what he's trying to say.
Yeah, I was really confused at first because as I was watching, I think I missed the first time he did that where he asked a question but didn't have any vocalization for it. And so I was like, wait, what is she doing? Why is she like talking to him? And it kind of threw me off until I caught on to what they were doing. Yeah.
Speaking of the flashbacks, I think they're also kind of really endearing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
The rest of the show being just kind of over-the-top comedy and ridiculous fights and things like that. There were 2 or 3 scenes, I think, where they went back to their childhood. And those are very developed scenes. They weren't just like quick 2-minute sort of things. They were pretty lengthy.
Yeah, it took up most of the episode.
Yeah. And they were actually really sweet.
Oh, yeah. And it was done in a way that wasn't like, remember this time when? It actually developed the characters in a way that made you appreciate them more and understand them better.
One other character that we haven't really talked about is the mascot character.
Yes.
So in Magical Girl anime, they usually sign a contract with something, a cat or something like that. And that person, that entity is supposed to be their guide and help them in their mission.
Absolutely.
And in this case, the mascot is this very scary-looking guy, just a guy.
Yeah, they often refer to him as a Yakuza.
Yeah, when she first approaches her house, when Saki first goes home and sees this guy, she's like, oh no, what did my mom do? Like, she's in trouble with the Yakuza, and what's her relationship with this guy?
Which she didn't seem too surprised, which kind of makes me wonder, like, what does she think her mom gets into?
Yeah, I don't know. This mascot guy, he kind of has a tick where he just says, damn it, at the end of every sentence, too. Yes. And when he is actually going around to try to guide the magical girls in their fights, he turns into a little fairy-type creature.
Yes.
That just has like a cute sort of little fairy body and then his big head on top of it.
Like his normal human-looking head.
Yeah.
On like a cute little bear fairy body.
And I also noticed just another little aside about that guy. When his phone rings, he had it in his pocket or something and it was on vibrate. And the sound for his phone vibrating was the same voice actor just going,
That's funny. I didn't notice that.
So.
There's one other, I can't say it's a character. It's a group of characters that I really want to talk about, which are the demons.
Yes.
Because they are really funny. Part of what I loved about this show, in contrast to a lot of magical girl animes, is that there isn't this monster of the week sort of play. The demons that we're seeing are the same demons every single episode. So when we see new ones, they're just little variations of the same demons that we've seen. We're dealing with the same kind of enemies through each episode, which I really enjoyed. Yep. But these demons start off being cute little, like, teddy bear things that you can, like, hold in your hands. And then they transform into these giant, buff bear squirrel things.
Yes.
And it's kind of amazing.
They're very disturbing in a way. And it's like you said, they have very little variation amongst each other. So some of them are a little taller or more buff or more rounded, but they just have these weird, like, cute, creepy faces and big, huge, buff, muscly bodies. And that's also going back to how Saki's dream was to be a magical girl and to fight demons and save the world. In her dream, she had pictured like this scary monster thing.
Yeah. Something that you would think would be like something you'd really be fighting. Yeah. Like a lizardy dragon-looking thing. Instead,
it's these like squirrel creatures who lure humans into accepting them because they're cute, and then just try to drag them back through the portal to hell or whatever.
The other thing I love about them is that even when they are transformed into the buff versions of themselves, that they still have these really high-pitched, cute little, like, squirrely...
Squeaky, sort of. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, that was good, too.
When it came to the actual plot, part of what I really love is that there is a lot of self-referential humor. Because I personally am such a fan, I grew up watching, like, Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura. These are, like, the shows that I really, really love. So I like that they took a genre that I really loved and made a lot of inside jokes about that genre. Like when they transform into the dudes and when they have to say the name of the person that they're in love with in front of everybody. These are kind of things that we like see a lot. But my favorite part is that it finally answers the question, do people know what's going on while the girl is transforming? And the answer in this series is yes. People can watch you transform and they see the transformation.
Yep.
And it's hysterical.
There's one part even where the girls are getting ready to go on their television appearance. And they almost forget to do it because the TV studio is expecting two huge men. And so they go into the women's restroom and both lock themselves in stalls while the bathroom is still being used. There are other people in it.
Women.
Yeah. And they both shout their love interests at the top of their lungs, and these big explosions happen as they're transforming, and suddenly two huge dudes come out of the stalls.
And all the women are just like, what in the world is happening here? And I could not like control myself.
Yep. What do you think of the animation quality and some of the character designs and the music and how all of the visual and audio elements work together?
So the animation itself is really pretty similar to what's popular right now. Not to say that it's bad in any way. It's just not anything special. It looks nice. It's well drawn. You know, you can see that people put energy and money into it, and it looks nice. It's just not unique in any way. It's just sort of what's going on right now. It's
kind of that typical 3D shiny sort of looking thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say the most striking thing to me was probably seeing the intro for the first time. Because when you first see the intro, not much has happened. I think it's right after the dream sequence.
Yes.
And so you are suddenly assaulted with the male forms of both of the characters. You see the demon squirrel things for the first time running around on screen.
Yes.
And those, unlike the magical girls themselves, were not really shown in any promotional sort of materials.
Right.
So you just suddenly see these weird-looking creatures running around, and it was a trip to watch that for the first time. The idol music is pretty not terrible.
No, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. At one point, they actually make a joke about it. Like we had talked about before, in one of the episodes, Mohiro is young, and he's singing to the girls, and if you read the lyrics, it's really nonsense. It's really weird and it's not proper sentences. And they actually make fun of him for it. And so it's interesting to see like later on, like he develops as a character as he can actually write music. But yeah, they sound good and it's enjoyable.
Yeah, especially there is a number where they first introduced Star Prince and the band. They're on a TV broadcast doing an interview and a performance, and they both sing the song and do this choreography in front of a big audience. And that song is actually used for the rest of the show, at least the parts that we saw, as the ending credits song.
Yeah.
And it's catchy. It's fun. As far as the animation for that stuff, sometimes that can get touchy because it's hard to animate people singing and dancing generally.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was kind of worried about that. I think they did okay.
Yeah.
There were definitely, in that particular scene, since it was an entire song, they reused several parts that were exactly the same animation frames, and, the chorus was obviously just cut and pasted. But otherwise, it was fine. And the fact that Saki can't really sing that well is great. It's probably my favorite thing about the show so far. In just, they didn't try to overproduce them.
Yeah.
So Star Prince being super cut and dry, clean, they've got their act together and they're perfectly in sync, and these other two are really scraping by. And I think the animation really shined in those instead. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, the thing with Saki is when we say she's like a terrible singer, we don't mean like it's god-awful and it hurts your ears. She's actually just like a little off-key.
Yeah.
So for me, not having quite the musical ear that you do, I didn't quite notice it at first until it became more and more obvious. And not that she was getting worse. It was just like, what is sounding so weird?
Yeah.
And then I realized it was her singing just a little off-key.
Yeah.
And that just made her as a character so endearing to me.
Yeah.
The fact that they wouldn't give her that redeemable quality of, well, at least she's a good singer.
Right. And the most interesting thing to me is that nobody mentions it.
Yeah,
It never comes up that, hey, the band is failing because you can't sing, and now we need a new person to replace you. Her friend never mentions it. She acts like she's her best friend and she loves her, and we're just gonna do this duo together. In fact, in the flashback where those two are interacting, Saki starts like practicing how to sing to mimic Mohiro and try to be like him, and her friend comes in and starts doing the same thing, and they both train together basically their whole life. So that's really fun.
Yeah. One thing that I was just thinking about with the animation, there is a part of the animation that they kind of deterred from their normal style with that I thought was a lot of fun. So there's this reoccurring thing with Saki that she runs out the door before her mom's able to give her breakfast. And so her mom gives her this huge, ginormous breakfast for her to like eat on her way
It's like a piled high plate of parfait or something where you'd typically have the tropey sort of toast in the mouth sort of scene.
Yeah, she's like holding a plate and like devouring the food. So during one of these scenes, Saki looks down at her food and they break to a live action shot of what would actually be this food.
Yeah.
So it was kind of interesting because they just go right back to the animation. There's no reason for them to have put in this live action shot. And it was just this weird kind of jarring, humorous thing that they did. And I found it really amusing that they kind of just slipped that in there for the heck of it.
I sort of wonder if somebody at the studio had made something they were proud of that day and just like, picture, I'll put this in there.
Yeah. Or they found it too hard to draw and they just decided to put a picture.
Screw it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there were quite a few visual gags like that I enjoyed a lot. So they do a lot of distorted, weird-looking faces, and when they're agitated or flustered or something, you see that a lot in this kind of anime. They also blurred out a bunch of gross things.
Yes.
So anytime that the violence is happening on screen, it's not actually shown. It's all behind a pixelated wall. So when they're just bashing demons to death, it's all kind of blurred in a funny way.
Yeah, they always like turn the camera or something.
There was this one scene where she was waving her arms really fast, and it was making the sound of a jet engine behind her, if you noticed that. That was spinning up, and it started to blow jet streams at the other characters as she was spinning up. One of my favorite things in terms of visual gags was that in certain magical girl anime, what you might see a lot of is when they're doing a transformation scene or they're doing some sort of pan and zoom around the magical girl, there's definitely going to be a part where they zoom in on her breasts.
Yes, always.
And there's some sort of bouncing involved. That's a thing you might typically see in these shows.
Yep.
They heavily zoom in on the guy's pecs when they are transformed.
They also have a shot of his crotch, too.
They do.
With him wearing panties, like girl panties.
Yep. Yeah. So they use all the same mechanisms, but they don't change anything about it. They just, now it's a guy. So that's pretty funny, too.
Yeah, I throughout the whole show, it was funny, while we were watching it, I kept pointing things out to Colin and being like, oh, this is exactly like from Sailor Moon, and this is from Cardcaptor, and I loved all the little like throwbacks to those shows that they would make, like references to those shows, sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes not in subtle ways at all. So sometimes it would be like, we're going to use the same similar looking weapon, and as Colin said earlier, that weapon is not actually magical. It is just used to beat people with.
Yeah.
Demons, not people. But yeah, I loved all the like little references, but they still stayed true to their theme, which was, these aren't the kind of magical girls that you think they are.
Right. In fact, not all of those parodies are direct to a magical girl series. I pointed one out to you that was when, what is her friend's name? I keep forgetting it.
Oh, it's...
Sakuya.
Yes, thank you.
So when Sakuya first transforms into a magical girl, she immediately starts beating up a demon.
Yes.
And she does it in a way that is very reminiscent of Fist of the North Star. And she starts beating it up and going, yeah, da, 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 da. That sort of thing. Again, kind of pointing to the fact that these aren't magical girls. Now they're these like big buff dudes and they just beat stuff up. I'm not super into the character designs.
Okay.
At least Saki.
Okay.
I think she has dumb, illogical hair, first of all. I learned that, you know that thing you always see where they have one strand of hair sticking out?
Yeah, sure.
That's called an ahoge.
Okay, it has a specific
It has a name in
course
anime.
It does. Of course it does.
So I'm learning stuff as well. It usually indicates a sort of dumb character, generally.
Oh, that makes sense.
That indicates, like, they're not functional in some ways, one way or another.
Which is.
Does line up because her friend is the better version of her, basically. Additionally, Saki's mom looks like she's probably 19.
Yes.
But she's complaining about, like, her back is out and she's super old and she's too old to be a magical girl.
The thing I did love about the way her mom looks, though, is that her mom just looks like an older version of her.
Yeah.
So she actually still has, like, the quintessential main character pink hair.
Yep.
You know, in every anime, you can always tell who the main character is by the color of their hair. She has unusual pink hair as well.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of fun.
She actually also has an ahoge, but it's a double.
Oh, you're right. She does.
So I wonder if they're saying that she's double dumb.
Double useless now that her back is broken. Well, not broken, but hurt.
What I do like is that her weird illogical features and her character design does transfer into her male form.
Yes.
She still has a big strand of hair sticking out when she's a guy. And it's still the same color pink, and it still doesn't make sense.
So with the character designs, I'm kind of curious what you think of Sakuyo's male form.
Okay.
Because the thing that I noticed was that when she transforms into her version of the magical girl, which is a big buff dude, she looks like her brother Mohiro.
Yes.
But ripped. Because
Right.
Mohiro is just like
He's
skinny
a skinny
dude.
pop guy.
Yeah.
In fact, at one point they specifically point this out. She is looking at her brother as he's walking down the hall of their house. And in her mind, she like compares their faces to her transformed version. And she's like, oh, we're the same. So I guess continuity-wise, like, she really just does transform into a male version of herself.
Which looks like her brother.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like that.
Yeah. I thought that was clever on their part in order to keep that continuity and not just be like, we just made her look like more masculine. Is since she had a brother that was there as a part of the plot, it actually makes sense that she would look like him.
Cool. So do you have any general thoughts to wrap things up? Any likes or dislikes that we haven't covered already?
I think that the show is just a lot of fun. Like I said, it's kind of it's a parody of a genre that I really enjoy, but it's done in a way that's not saying that the genre is bad. It's not saying like, oh, ha ha ha, this thing is so dumb, so let's make fun of it. It's like, hey, we know you really love this thing, and let's just make it more fun, even more fun than it already is. And I love that specifically.
Yeah. I am not typically a fan of magical girl series.
What?
Nor am I typically a fan of idol shows.
Sure.
I'd say the exception is the rare thing that kind of tries to subvert the genre. So I think of Madoka Magica is a very different example of a magical girl series.
Sure.
It also doesn't, it's not making fun of it. Right. Obviously, that's a very serious show.
Yes, very serious.
But it does so in a really intelligent and kind of impactful way. Whereas this does it in a humorous way that doesn't detract from what it's trying to parody.
Yes.
So I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
I did enjoy that fact as well. And the idol stuff didn't make me want to barf, so
yeah, and
I can give it credit for that.
That's a big deal because Colin's really into music, and it is really hard for him if things are not done well.
I'm not also a big fan of cheap kind of referential humor. You might hear me say this on a lot of episodes from here on out. I really enjoy good parody. I don't like referential humor. It's cheap and easy. This show kind of balances between those two things.
Yeah.
So some are really good scenes of parody that don't directly point out like, oh, hey, this thing is funny and we want to make you think about that funny thing. Instead, they're just trying to do a funny thing and it's kind of reminiscent of that thing. Sometimes it does that well. Other times it's very cheap.
Yeah.
One of the opening scenes even is she just starts talking about like, oh, that'll be too difficult for the animators and you shouldn't do that. Not into that.
That's where we differ. I like meta humor quite a bit, so I enjoyed that scene. I was immediately on board. So I guess the question to ask is, would you watch more of this show?
As opposed to last week, yes, I think I would watch more of this.
Yeah, I'm totally on board. I'm actually like, it was really hard for me to stop at episode 4.
Yeah.
I wanted to keep watching, so I look forward to watching the rest of this.
Yeah, in general, 4 was kind of a weird episode.
Yes.
But especially bad to end on.
Yes.
Because it just introduced a character that we have no idea who they are, really.
But they are in the intro.
Right. Well, there's actually 3 characters, if that's the one you're thinking of. So there's Fujimoto, who is this like vigilante, weird superhero character who appears to actually just be a poor person who can't afford like
a
nice stuff or a real costume or
Mm-hmm.
weapons or anything. And his tactic appears to be just kick them in the nuts a little bit and they fall over. But we don't know anything about that person because they're wearing a mask and they just kind of showed up and we don't know who they are. We also don't really know what's up with the other Star Prince guy, the one who's not Mohiro. he seems a little shady.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We don't know what he's doing.
No, but something's up.
Mohiro keeps getting targeted by the demons, and they have to go to him every time there's an incident. And the other Star Prince guy seems to have something to do with it.
Oh, yeah.
We don't really know what.
Yeah.
And then there's also these two girls who are shown in the intro, and they just appeared in episode 4. They appear to be some other pop group.
Yeah, that's what they were referencing to, that they were also stars.
So there's a lot of loose threads that opened up in episode 4 specifically. So I think that's why we're probably feeling that tension.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I'm excited to get back into it.
Yeah, but me too. I'm looking forward to it.
So I think that's going to do it for this week's show.
I think so.
But this was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this series of episodes.
It was a welcome break from the first week.
Yes. So if you want to learn more about our show, you can visit our website at animonday.moe. That's animonday.moe. If you have any questions or you want to send us any comments, you can send that to podcast@animonday.moe. Or you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. Our username is AniMondayCast. And there's going to be links to that on our website.
And here come all the thanks. Thank you to Crunchyroll for the work that they do and for providing the random button, which will ensue all of these hijinks. If you want to follow along each week, we'll have a link to our current title on the website and on our social media. Some might require a premium subscription to Crunchyroll, but it's well worth it, so you should check it out. You can also watch all of these anime on their bundling service called Verve, which is at vrv.co. That gives you access to Crunchyroll, Funimation, and a bunch of others. Thanks also to C2A for allowing us to use his music for the intro and outro of our program. You can find both of those songs on the Senpai EPs, which are available on his Bandcamp, and other major streaming services like Spotify and things of that sort. As usual, there will be links in the show notes and on our website if you want to check him out.
Are you ready to roll for next week?
I am ready. Let's do this.
Okay.
Random button. 3, 2, 1. Oh boy. Our selection for the week is Monster Musume, Everyday Life with Monster Girls.
Yeah, and the first episode is called Everyday Life with Lamia.
Oh boy, I've definitely heard of this one.
Have you?
Yeah.
Man, I have not heard of this.
I think this is a fairly recent one as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Here we go. Well, I think that's going to do it for us this week. And thanks so much for joining us on our second episode.
Yeah, we're going to see you next week.
All right. See you next week.
Are you ready to roll for next week?
I think I am ready to roll. I'm actually not.
Yeah, I figured. Oh my God, it's so hot in here. I'm dying.
I know. It was not this hot
It
last time.
wasn't. God.